Hey guys, Moms Against Medical Bullying. So I wanted to screen record Dr. Cowan's presentation from today, a snippet of it at least. So here goes.
And so it's not just confined to...
So here he's talking about how about the blood-brain barrier.
Structures, we're also talking about functions. So we hear a lot about the blood-brain barrier. So apparently what we mean is there's blood, and I assume you mean blood vessels. And at the blood vessels in the brain, there's some barrier like cellophane or something that keeps the contents of the blood from getting into the brain like it would in the liver. So I went looking for a picture of the blood vessels and the connection in the liver, which is what this is. So here's a blood vessel. This is a bigger blood vessel, little blood vessels. There is no barrier. Okay, so we know there's no blood-liver barrier, at least that you can see on a light microscope. So here's a picture of the brain. We see blood vessels. There's no barrier. Now, maybe it's too small and we have to see it with an electron microscope. I went looking and I didn't see it. So we have to question that, whether there is a blood-brain barrier. I would love to see a picture of something, an anatomical structure called a barrier, because I don't see it. So the question then, what does this have to do with why we get sick, is what are we actually made of? What can we prove? And here is all you can really see. And again, Ling and Hillman go into this in great detail. You see a very smooth cell membrane like this. There are no receptors in the cell membrane, no ACE2 receptors sticking out of the membrane. All the pictures you will see of that are drawings. There's no evidence that this is a lipid bilayer. It is a smooth, probably fat-soluble, but maybe just highly organized water membrane. And then you see here, very organized, coherent, structured, or what Ling calls polarized water, which is what the cytoplasm is. And then you do, in fact, see mitochondria, which make ATP, which have nothing to do with energy. That is another myth that unfortunately is propagated. And I can get into at some point what exactly ATP does, because essentially what it does is it binds to the proteins, unfolds them, and allows this structuring of the water to occur, which then forms the cytoplasm, and the structured water creates voltage, which is what gives us life. And then you do see a nucleus with a vaguely defined membrane around it. And that's it. No ribosomes, no lipid bilayer membrane, no endoplasmic reticulum, no lysosomes, no Golgi apparatus, no astrocytes, no synapses in nerves, no receptors in cell membranes, no sodium-potassium pump. There are no pumps in this membrane. ATP is not a source of energy. It plays the role that heat does with jello. It unfolds the proteins and allows the water structuring to occur. There are no cristae in mitochondria. There's no blood-brain barrier as an anatomical structure. And DNA is not a double helix. That one we'll have to go to another time. So if you realize that this is the system that we're dealing with, then it immediately gives you a unified theory of how disease comes about. Because all we have is an ATP, which has to do with structuring the water, organelle, organized, coherent water, and a nucleus which has genetic material in it, which I would submit functions like an antenna. So the way to think of this system is we're essentially talking like about a radio. And the radio is represented by the water structure, that is the physical structure. The radio downloads information of what sort? Energies, frequencies, love, emotions, wavelengths, sound, thought, all the different electromagnetic frequencies, wavelengths, sound, light. Light is very important. The nucleic acids take this and they create this very special structured water called DNA water that diffuses into the cytoplasm, and then without any other code needed, but just the presence of these nucleic acids for energy and for their antenna, they create the proteins which create the living being. And that's all there is to it. And so this immediately makes sense of all of the history of natural medicine. If you have toxins, glyphosate, bad emotions, aluminum, mercury dissolved in your gel, your radio is out of tune and you will make the wrong kind of proteins. Your body can't tolerate that, so it will do the only thing it can to essentially dissolve the gel. That's called a fever, and then it will flush out the contents, and that's called mucus and barfing and coughing and diarrhea. And that's why every natural medicine system used fever therapy. Hippocrates said, give me a medicine to produce a fever and I can treat and cure any disease, because he was aware apparently of this system. Energy downloaded by the watery crystal, that produces an outcome. And the reason we're made of water crystals is because water with its DNA antenna can download any kind of information in the form of wavelengths and thought. And it can also download toxic information in the form of electromagnetic frequencies like Wi-Fi and radio signals and radar, etc. So every therapy, the Gerson therapy, sweat lodges, saunas, all can be seen out of this one model. You can see the problem with a cataract in your eye, that is a pure water crystal, and you put abnormal electromagnetic frequencies like a computer, and you eat toxic food and drink toxic water, and you can't flush them out because it's a crystal structure in your eye, and so it starts precipitating, and that's what we call a cataract. You see the same thing happening in your knee. You get the water loses its structure. It no longer forms this negatively charged gel, which is what lines the joints and creates this electromagnetic repulsion, which allows for free movement and a sort of cushioning. And then we have bone on bone, and we call that osteoarthritis. And when you get to the subject of people say, so what causes measles or chickenpox? You have to start with the facts, which is that children are growing, maturing beings, and the reason we're made of water and not quartz is because the water can grow and evolve as we become more perfect crystals. That essentially is the game we're playing. So what happens with measles is there's some sort of universal toxin or situation, maybe electromagnetic frequencies, maybe a chemical. And for many, many children, it's impacting the integrity of their crystal, and the body wants to get rid of it. So it does the fever to dissolve the gel. It sends it out through the mucus and the complex spots or the rash on the skin. It communicates that through some sort of bioresonance to other children, that now we have the opportunity to do what is not a disease, but a maturation step, which is exactly why every study that looks at what happens to children who get measles is they're better for life. Less cancer, less diabetes, less osteoarthritis, less ADD, less mental illness. If you poison them with a product otherwise known as a vaccine, you will inhibit their ability to go through the maturation step, and you will make the same pattern is across every culture and happens with every single so-called vaccination. You inhibit the maturation process and you cut off in some way the communication between organisms that say, now is a good time to go through this maturation process. It's harmless. We can do this. And you stop that and you end up with people who are essentially misfits because they can no longer be on this journey of purifying their gels, which is essentially the entire game that we're playing. Now,